I don't see it as a positive, constructive.
Western and Eastern technology.
I think that the insiders...
It's a way of progress.
The fact about it is this. This makes the people who are right.
I spied
The final item to protest.
benefits.
We get a lot of real problems.
We look at Jim Allen's courtroom play, Perdition. The clerk of the court announces the case.
In the case of Dr. Miklos Yaran versus Ruth Kaplan, the plaintiff, Dr. Yaran, claims that the defendant, Ruth Kaplan, did falsely and maliciously write and publish a pamphlet entitled, I Accuse. On page 14 of the said pamphlet are the following words which form the substance of the alleged libel. I accuse certain Jewish leaders of collaborating with the Nazis in 1944. Among them was Dr. Yaran. He knew what was happening in the extermination camps and bought his own life and the lives of others with the price of silence.
Good evening. The beginning of proceedings in Jim Allen's controversial courtroom drama, Perdition. You won't have seen the play before, and except for the short extracts we'll be showing tonight, you're not likely to see it again, because it seems as if no theatre wants to put it on. It's about a libel action in which the plaintiff is really the accused. What he's accused of is collaboration, yes, collaboration with the Nazis in their extermination of nearly 1 million Hungarian Jews in 1944. Tonight, Jim Allen, the playwright, is here with others to defend his play, and he meets for the first time the historian of the Holocaust, Martin Gilbert, who, together with leaders of the Jewish community in Britain, criticizes the play. Perdition was due to open at London's Royal Court Theatre on January 22nd, not on the main stage, but in the smaller theatre upstairs. The court has often championed contentious works, and the play's director, Ken Loach, wasn't unduly concerned at the prospect of controversy, given the highly controversial nature of the play. But 36 hours before the play should have opened, the court's artistic director took it off, calling it selective and possibly a dishonest piece of writing. Ken Loach then approached a number of other West End theatres, some empty, but without success. Elsewhere, there was great interest at Sheffield, but the script was returned. The Exchange Theatre Company in Manchester turned it down, partly for its latent anti-Semitism. The Almeida told us they wanted nothing to do with it. Ken Loach suggests Zionist groups at work.
It was taken off, as far as we can see, because of pressure by a political group. They operated on a two-pronged attack. One was to create a kind of outrage in the public press, and then to manipulate behind the scenes with members of the Royal Court Council to meet them in secretly and to exert pressure backstage.
Max Stafford Clark, the Royal Court's artistic director, denies that pressure made him take it off. He came to the independent view that to stage the play would cause great distress to sections of the community. The play is based on the events which led to the extermination of Hungarian Jews and accuses Zionist leaders of collaborating with Nazi Adolf Eichmann in sending them to the gas chambers. Eichmann was tried in Jerusalem, found guilty and hanged. The play argues that somehow his partners in carrying out the slaughter were Hungary's Jewish leaders.
What would you say was Eichmann's biggest problem, Dr. Yaron?
I don't know what you mean.
Well, he came to Budapest to help murder 1 million Jews. His reputation had preceded him. Do you not agree that in order to successfully carry out his killing operation, he first of all had to dispel the fears of his victims, to hoodwink them?
I suppose so.
Now, do you agree, Dr. Yaron?
Yes.
And what better way of achieving this than by enlisting the help of leaders like yourself and Dr. Rudolf Kastner.
That is a lie. It was not like that.
But you carried out his orders. You did everything that Eichmann asked of you.
We had no choice, but we did not support him. Not in the way you mean.
What was the first instruction that Eichmann gave you at that meeting in the Hotel Majestic? Well, you have already referred to it, Dr. Yaron. It was to inform the leaders of every Jewish community in Hungary that henceforth they were to carry out the orders of the Central Jewish Council in Budapest. Is that not correct?
Yes.
I have here a copy of the manifesto. The Central Jewish Council has been granted the right of absolute disposal over all Jewish manpower. You women and girls, men and boys are all executors of the instructions issued by the Central Council. You must realize that every decision, however momentous it may be, is the outcome of official intervention, and that the life of every individual and the existence of the community as a whole depends on such instructions being fully observed. The right of absolute disposal. Why do you think Eichmann gave such powers to the council, Dr. Yarrow?
Whatever the reason, we were in no position to argue.
But you were in a position to cooperate.
We had no choice.
I suggest, Dr. Yaron, that the very first step along the road which led to the destruction of Hungarian Jewry was when you put your names to that manifesto.
It was the only valid response.
Martin Gilbert, is the play there based accurately on real historical events?
It is, and then it uses them really to pervert the history. Of course, Dr. Yaron's only response was to do as ordered, but he was not ordered to destroy the Jews. This was not the first step on their road to destruction. The first step was the Nazi determination to destroy them and the setting into mechanism of an SS commando led by Eichmann to go into Hungary and to work out the means to deceive the Jews and then to murder as many as possible.
Is that account of what happened when the Jewish leaders, including the Yaron figure, Kastner, went to the Hotel Majestic, is that true?
It's not true in the sense that, like everything based upon Mr. Brenner's work here, it's very simplistic, very simplified. It's not historical in any academic or precise sense. Perhaps this wouldn't matter, but of course the lives of hundreds of thousands of people are not something really to reduce to an academic debate. These are disgraceful allegations in this play which go far beyond any historical pedantic point.
Dr. Roth, you were in Budapest at the time when the Jewish leaders, and of course in the play it says they're from the Jewish Council, but I think these were people from the Jewish Rescue Committee, when they went to see Eichmann, was there not some question of doing a deal with Eichmann?
There was a question of doing a deal. The members of the Rescue Committee took up negotiations which originally started in Slovakia between the Slovakian Jewish Rescue Committee and the Nazis of saving the life of 1 million Jews against certain material compensation which the Germans badly wanted.
Jim Allen, disgraceful, Martin Gilbert called it.
Yeah. In 1953, Hungarian leader Kastner was found guilty of collaboration in the Jerusalem courts. The play quotes 9 lines. The play quotes the judgment of Israeli Supreme Court Judge Levy. He says, not Jim Allen, the Jews of the ghettos would not have trusted the Nazi or Hungarian rulers, but they had trust in their Jewish leaders. Eichmann and others used this known fact as part of their calculated plan to mislead the Jews. They were able to deport the Jews to their extermination by the help of Jewish leaders.
And this judgment was overruled in the Supreme Court, and in a play which is meant to be a dialogue, it is actually atrocious not to put in this fact in the play. Of course, you can have a debate as to whether it was possible to squeeze some rescue in this circumstance of appalling brutality and threat. But you can't simply put a one-sided point of view on every element, every so-called fact. Every fact in this play is without its context, the context of the Nazi determination to murder every Jew in Europe.
Jim Allen?
It was overruled because the Israeli government identified themselves with the fate of Kastner. They had to defend Kastner because they too were on trial.
Actually, this isn't true because differing from our system of justice, it is possible in Israel to overrule a judgment on a point of fact and not on a point of law. And in this case, it was overruled on a point of fact. And again, you cannot bring to trial Jews who in the main are dead, because of course most Zionist leaders were murdered by the Nazis, and the Nazis did not differentiate when people came out of the cattle trucks, Zionists to the left kindly, and non-Zionists to their death. I'm sure when Hugo Gryn came to Auschwitz, nobody said to him, by the way, are you a Zionist family? We'll rescue you. It is a travesty, and it is actually disgraceful that something like this should even be debated as if somehow there is a right and a wrong here. There is simply an allegation against Jews which has no basis in fact.
Lenni Brenner, author of Zionism in the Age of the Dictators. What do you say to that?
Well, you know, I'm a historian, so I just look at the record. Now, we know what Eichmann thought about Kastner, because while Eichmann was in hiding in Buenos Aires, he made 67 tapes, okay? Now, this is what Eichmann said about Kastner, quote, an ice-cold lawyer and a fanatical Zionist, he agreed to help the Jews from resisting deportation and even kept order in the collection camps if I would close my eyes and let a few hundred or a few thousand young Jews emigrate illegally to Palestine. It was a good bargain.
Here is a Jew believing Eichmann. I'm sorry, here is a Jew believing Eichmann. This is what
out of order.
Mr. Allen says Jews did.
Wool sellers, no wool buyers. Eichmann saw a collaborator, he worked with him.
Mr. Brenner, I must ask you to take notice of what Mr. Gilbert has said, which is that this is Eichmann's statement in his own defense. He would say that, wouldn't he, if he was trying to pretend that he wasn't entirely responsible for exterminating the Jews?
Oh, he admits he exterminated the Jews.
I know, but he's suggesting that the Jews helped him.
No, he is saying that Kastner helped him.
It, of course, is it just the history of 1944 with which your play is concerned, Jim Allen? It's also concerned, this play, with the pre-war history of Zionism in its relationship with Nazism. And it's its interpretation of that relationship which does help the play interpret the events of 1944 in the way it does. In the extract we're now going to see from the play, the defense is questioning the girl accused, who is really the accuser.
Did the Zionists fight Hitler?
No, instead they tried to set up a special relationship with him to serve their own interests.
Even though world Jewry was opposed to fascism?
Yes, but we're talking now about Zionism, and there is a difference. When the Jewish workers went out into the streets and joined forces with the German working class to fight the brown shirts, the Zionist leaders waved olive branches and condemned all anti-Nazi activity.
So they were seeking an accommodation with them, is that what you're telling the jury?
Absolutely. They entered into secret negotiations with the Nazis, arguing that they too believed in racial exclusiveness. Prince also said that any state which is constructed on the principle of purity of nation and race can only have respect for those Jews who see themselves in the same way.
And in this special relationship, did it ever materialize?
For as long as it suited the Nazis, yes. The Zionists became Hitler's favorite Jews.
And while every other political party in Germany was made illegal, they were allowed to exist. And the Zionist banner flew alongside the swastika.
Are you saying, Miss Kaplan, that the Zionists preferred Hitler and supported him?
No. They were utilizing a threat which to them signaled the bankruptcy of assimilation and paved the way for the creation of the Jewish state.
Well, then what in practical terms did Eichmann and the Nazis have to offer the Zionists?
Patronage and support of immigration to Palestine.
And again, in practical terms, what did the Zionists have to offer the Nazis?
Cooperation. Even to the extent of supplying the Nazis with intelligence information.
You mean spying for them?
Yes.
Martin Gilbert, is there any truth in any of that?
Well, of course, the Zionists weren't Hitler's favorite Jews. Among the 6 million Jews who were murdered, unnumbered Jews were Zionists, and indeed not only Zionists, but the children of Zionists, who were, after all, in the Zionist ideology, to be the future builders up of Palestine. And the picture behind me actually shows people going to their deaths after an uprising in which the Zionists were the principal organizers, although in this play we learn, for example, that the Jewish councils participate in the extermination of the Jews. So it is a farrago of nonsense.
Martin Gilbert is either an incompetent historian or a liar. The documents are there, and he knows it, that the Zionists became Hitler's favorite Jew because the Zionists believe, and this is the guts of their doctrine, that you cannot fight anti-Semitism except by getting away with it. Hitler wanted the Jews out of Europe, and the Zionists wanted the Jews into Palestine. And the documents are there. Lenni's book has got the memorandum submitted by the Zionist Federation in Germany. Writers of the caliber of Hannah Arendt has documented the speeches, and for him to say this is an absolute lie.
Stephen Roth.
Well, of course, the Zionists wanted the Jews to emigrate to get them out of Germany where they were under the Hitler rule. And the Germans at that time, before they really embarked on the mass extermination, followed a policy of emigration. So quite clearly there was contact between them, and quite clearly the German authorities, happy that there is an organization which takes out Jews, made it possible for them only in this respect, in regard to the emigration. But to twist this into a kind of ideological identity is monstrous and is offensive.
One simple question. Did Eichmann receive as a guest in Berlin a representative of the Haganah?
This is the document. This is the German report on the visit of Feivel Polkus, an agent of the Haganah, the precursor of the Israeli army, to Berlin in February 26, 1937, wherein he offered to spy for the Nazis. This is the complete text of the German report of Eichmann's visit to Palestine in October 1937 as the guest of the Haganah, where again he met with Feivel Polkus in Berlin, in Jerusalem, and then in Cairo, and they discussed collaboration. Now, I don't write these documents in German.
Perhaps we can bring in Martin Gilbert. Please, Mr. Brenner, can we ask the alternate historian, as it were? What about these documents?
Well, it does state also, of course, in the play that Eichmann visited Palestine, as it then was, as the guest of the Zionists, as they're called in the play, and that he went to a kibbutz. A great deal of research has gone on to try to find evidence for this, which has failed. I, too, have the document which Mr. Brenner has produced, and it actually does not give that picture. It's a very obscure document. Who Mr. Polkus was is also not clear. He was certainly not a member of any of the known Zionist groups or Haganah groups.
We are obviously not here going to arrive at a position where one side agrees with the other. Marion Woolfson, is this event which we are discussing here, we have with us here Rabbi Gryn, who survived Auschwitz, is this not a historic event of such unique horror that to distort history in relation to it is to cause unique offense, and therefore it has to be considered very, very special and separate?
Well, if history is distorted, yes. But based on the... I'm not an expert on that particular period, but based on the material I have seen, I don't think it is distorted. Yeah. And I think one ought to at least give the play a chance and see it first. I mean, how can you condemn something which hasn't been produced? This is sensitive.
We have here a situation where, in fact, we have seen the play. I've seen the play, and I listened to.
Where have you seen the play?
I have read the play. I have read the text.
I didn't give it you, but you read it.
Well, I read it anyway.
Sure.
And the point of this is that if you say something long enough, loud enough, I suppose, and this is the old truism, eventually some people will believe it. But what we are debating here, on the one hand, you write a play in which you make the charge that the Jews colluded with their enemies. Deplorable. Now you're complaining because Jews refuse to collude now with people whom they perceive to be your enemies. And your play is really not just hurtful and painful, but I find it deeply offensive, because what you are doing is you are, as it were, dancing on the grave of people who are no longer alive, I think that's inadmissible myself.
Right.
Jim Allen.
Yeah. Let us get to the question of censorship before the programme ends. Dr. Stephen Roth, in The Guardian, says that he could picket, he could contact the World Court's friends in New York, he could influence funding bodies in London to prevent...
Wait for The Guardian tomorrow to publish my reputation.
Please let...
It's not true.
Will you please let Mr. Allen finish? Mr. Allen, go on.
Right. Now, these were no idle threats. There was one producer in London who was prepared to consider putting the play on. He then rang us and he said, I've had a phone call, threatened, told, I own 9 theatres, my friend owns 6 theatres, put Perdition on, and you will never bring a play into any of our theatres. He gets a phone call from New York. If you will jeopardise your career if you put Perdition on. We went to Dublin. We was told in Dublin by the Olympic Theatre it will go on. And then the scare came in. Wherever we went, the intimidation, the Zionist lobby, and finally, you are not on the Royal Court Board, Martin Gilbert isn't on the Royal Court Board, and neither is Lord Weidenfeld. While I, the director, and the actors were busting a gut to put this play on, 4 days beforehand, you had a secret meeting at Sonia Melchert's house, right?
If there were a play on which, in your view, was very offensive to one of your heroes, would you not act and do what you could to see that the play didn't go on?
The only play that I would campaign against being shown on a stage was if someone like the National Front produced a play applauding fascism, then I would say that play must not be performed. I make no compromise.
But you see, Rabbi Gryn thinks exactly that is what you are doing with
You see, I mean, there is here your charge that somehow the Jews involved in suppressing. I happen to think you're building on another stereotype. The fact is that it was you and the people with you who first made the publicity for it. Then you make the publicity, people read the publicity, they react, you say, my God, how can they do that? What is
my allegiance is to the truth.
Now, what is it that you're really trying to say and to do to the remnants of the Jewish people?
My allegiance is to the truth, and I tell the remnants of the Jewish people. I'm a Jew.
That's right.
I'm a Jew, and I say,
have you not heard of
look at
Mr.
Zionism
Brenner?
exactly the way you look at Toryism or the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or the Labor Party. Zionism is an ism. It has an ideology, a history, and you look at it cold and factual.
I sit here and I watch you and I listen to you, and you then tell me, and I am a Jew. But have you not heard of the alienated Jew, the self-hating?
But I'm not alienated. I'm very proud of being a Jew.
You may be proud of it, but you come through with such hate. Why are you such
I am not allied to Ronald Reagan. The government that you support, Israel, is allied to Ronald Reagan. You get off your high moral horse, sir.
I will not get off my high moral horse.
Mr. Brenner,
and gets off a moral horse, he is on very, very shaky ground. It is precisely because I am on a moral horse and on an ethical horse that I say to you, think again and think of what you're really doing.
These are all real documents.
Marion Woolfson.
There is another aspect. There's this blackmail of the accusation of anti-Semitism. There's been a lot published about this in Israel. In fact, a play very similar to Jim's has been shown in Israel without all this fuss. But there's a writer in Israel called Boaz Evron who has written some marvelous articles about what he calls the Holocaust blackmail, where Zionists stifle criticism of all their actions by referring to the Holocaust and accusing the perpetrator of anti-Semitism.
Jim Allen, you've seen around this table the offence your play has created and the distress it causes. Do you still think it would be right to put it on?
Yes, it causes distress to these people who are here as the representatives of Zionism. It lets the skeletons out of the cupboard, and they will do anything possible to prevent the public seeing Perdition and making up their own mind.
I am not questioning for one moment that what Kastner did, or what others did, may have been controversial. It was a period where people had to take decisions at a moment's notice over life and death without any precedent, without any example to go by. And they may have made mistakes. What is dishonest? That Jim Allen says that all the mistakes are due to a Zionist doctrine which sacrifices life for the sake of the state of Israel. That is the dishonest part.
Thank you, Dr. Roth. Rabbi Gryn, as a survivor of Auschwitz, the only one around this table, I think you should have the last word.
Well, I think that Auschwitz, the Holocaust, calls for the response. I think the only proper response to it probably would be silence. But since we have to speak, I think it ought to be something that heals, tries to reconcile. Instead of scratching away at it and digging up things, half-truths, untruths, and maligning people. I mean, I sit here with you tonight because I feel that one owes some kind of a debt to the memory of the people who are no longer alive to give that. And that memory has to be desperate situation, desperate man, doing whatever they could to try and save people and failed. And there is no reason to rejoice over that.
Rabbi Gryn, thank you.